Hello, welcome to lesson 9. We're going to work with multi step problems. We've been working with two-step problems. However, we now need to get into multi step, which is usually more than two. So, we're going to look at this problem, kind of walk through how to do it, and then we'll put what we learned to practice. All right, so it says Tia mowed Miss Vega's lawn 4 days last month. Each day she worked 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. Write an equation to find how many hours Tia worked mowing Mrs. Vega's lawn. Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I have a lot of information in here, but I also want to read the important information from the problem and figure out what it's asking me. So I know it says 4 days last month. That's pretty important. It's 4 days. Each day, she worked 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. Okay, so 2 hours and 1 hour. Write an equation to find how many hours Tia worked. So I'm not solving it, I'm just writing an equation. Okay, and we're going to walk through how to do that. So this has been drawn out for you. What I usually recommend is if you have a word problem, draw it out so it shows we have 4 days. Morning, she worked 2 hours each of those days, and in the afternoon, she worked 1 hour each of those days. So now we've got to write an equation to find out how many hours. Well, let's walk through this process. So we need to write an expression to show how many hours Tia worked each day. Now, expression. Expression is different from equation. All right. An expression just tells the stuff before the equal sign. So, for example, 3 times 2 is an expression. Okay. That's an expression. I'm just expressing the problem. 3 times 2 equals 6 is the equation. It's the equation. Because whenever you have an equal sign, it's an equation, equal sign equation. If there's no equal sign, it's an expression. So we're just going to write an expression to show how many hours Tia worked each day. Well, for how many hours she worked each day, we're not solving it, we're just writing an expression. So if she worked on day 1, she worked 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. How can we represent that day? What are we going to do to these two numbers for that day? Well, an expression for each day would be 2 plus 1, right? 2 hours plus 1 hour. Okay. Now, an equation has an equal sign and an answer. Okay. We can have an expression with an equal sign, but we have to have a letter. It's an unknown expression. Okay. We haven't solved for it. So we're going to put a letter to represent the unknown. Normally we write question marks, but instead of a question mark, I'm going to put a letter. So instead of a question mark, I'm going to put a letter and I'm going to put hours. I'm going to put H. Okay. So my expression is 2 plus 1 equals H. H equals how many hours she worked each day. Okay. This is what H equals. How many hours Tia worked each day. I can find that out by adding the 2 hours in the morning plus the 1 hour in the afternoon. Okay. We're not writing the equation. We don't have an answer. We have an expression. So now it says, what will you need to do to the expression above to find out how many hours Tia worked all 4 days? Okay. So if this is what Tia worked in one day, right? Well, We need to figure out how many hours she worked in all 4 days. So, what I'm going to do is if 2 plus 1 equals H, I am going to write H. H is going to represent 2 plus 1, right? So, I know that 2 plus 1 is how many hours she worked a day. Okay, well, if I look up here, if I have H for how many hours she worked a day, I have H 4 times. Hmm. If I have H 4 times, I would probably think H times 4 equals, because I'm writing an expression, so I don't have an answer, right? And I'm going to know how many hours she worked all 4 days. So I'm going to do a D for all 4 days. So how many hours Tia worked all 4 days? I'm going to use D. Okay, so what will you need? H. This is H. So all of this is H. H times 4 gives me D. Okay, H times 4 gives me D. Remember, H is how many hours Tia worked each day, and D represents how many hours Tia worked all 4 days. So now we've got to write an expression for the number of hours she worked one day and put parentheses around it. Then show this amount multiplied by 4. All right, so we have to write an expression for the number of hours she worked one day. Well, I know that H is 2 plus 1. So I'm going to take this part. This is the expression of the equation, right? 2 plus 1. I'm going to put parentheses around it because knowing order of operations, I have to do what's in parentheses first. So I take H, which is 2 plus 1, and then I multiply it by 4 to give me D. Do you see how I did that? Okay. We have H, right? So H times 4 equals D. This is the same as this. I just took this and broke it up into 2 plus 1. All right, so I took this expression for H, put that in place of H so I can have numbers, because you can't multiply H times 4. You have to know what H is. So you have to use the numbers. And then that equals D. Okay. And choose a letter to represent the total hours. We already did that. We used D as the total hours, right? So then we have to write an equation to show how we would find that number. Well, we did that here. 2 plus 1 times 4 equals D. Now, not in any of this are we solving yet. Did not tell us to solve it. Okay. This just asked us to write an expression. Okay. Expressions don't give you an answer. Okay. So again, expressions are usually this, or they have no equal sign. Usually no equal sign is an expression. An equation is an equal sign with an answer. Okay. So if I were to solve this, I would say 2 plus 1. I would do that first, right? So I would see that 2 plus 1 gives me 3. And then I'd multiply it by 4 to get D. And then 3 times 4 is 12. And D equals 12. Okay, so that's how you model equations. That's kind of what lesson 9 is all about, okay? Making sure you look at those expressions and the letters and understand what they represent. Instead of question marks, since we're in 4th grade now, we got to put variables or letters in place of the question mark. So any unknown answer, if we don't know it, it's unknown. We got to put a letter for it. And you can come up with any letter you want.